And from the Wlea archives going back to November 1991, this is of Kevin Doran talking to then Assemblyman Don Davidsen. Now they talk here about the governor. They're talking about then Governor Mario Cuomo, the father of our current Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Now, from the information source, the award-winning Newsmaker Show, with your host, Kevin Doran.
And his guest, Donald Davidsen, who is the New York State Assemblyman for Steuben and
Yates.
Nassau. What's going on in Albany? Anything at all?
Well, not a lot. I think a lot of the discussions are certainly about the governor, possible run for presidency. The governor has indicated that he would like to see the budget considered on a 2-year basis. In other words, the final reckoning would not be in 92 but 93. He says that before he announces that he will run for president, the Senate must agree, the Assembly leadership has already agreed, to put the budget off on a 2-year basis.
Did he say that? I don't recall him. Did he tell you that privately or publicly or what?
That was what was reported in Albany, that that the Senate would have to agree to that before he would make any decision on running for the president.
Now, the Senate's controlled by Republicans, so if they don't want him to run for president, all they've got to do is not agree. Is that a fair statement?
Well, that would certainly call his bluff, at least. I think there's mixed emotions. I think there are some people who would
want him to run.
Well, they certainly want him to run.
Yes.
Anything to get him out of here. And he had said at one time that he would, if he ran for president, he would resign.
Mm-hmm.
However,
he's fudging on that now.
Well, he said his gut tells him not to resign. His head tells him to run. His heart tells him not to run. Or he's getting a lot of messages lately from various parts of his body.
Now, that's a terrible thing to say about the governor.
Well, that's what he says. I would not say the things that he says, but he's becoming somewhat of a joke, even among Democrat circles, because he can't make his mind up.
He's certainly been getting it among the cartoonists. They've been having a field day with this about how he can't make up his mind. Now, Randy Cool made a flat prediction here last week that he will run. That's Senator Cool. What is your feeling?
I think the odds are in favor of it. He's enough of a student of history. He knows what happened to Mike Dukakis. Mike had the Massachusetts Miracle as an albatross around his neck, and the governor knows that if he has to take New York State's financial record and run on that, he's.
But wouldn't that be another reason why he ought to resign? He can say, "Oh my Lord, look what happened since I left," because all those disasters would take place while Stan Lundeen was in charge.
If he had not run for re-election, he could get away with that. He could say that the problem was all because of his successor. Mm-hmm. It's too late to do that now. He's too intimately involved in this. It's 92 is almost here. The budget and the election and the deficit and the disasters are all falling into place at the same time, and I don't see how he can divorce himself from that. I mean, he can tell you and he will tell you it's the federal government's fault, it's the locality's fault, it's everybody's fault but his fault. But people aren't buying that. He's the chief fiscal officer.
Well, people in New York may not buy it, but they could in South Carolina. For example, Jack Kirkpatrick wrote a column the other day. He lives in either North or South Carolina, I can't recall which. And he said that Cuomo came there, and he went out and listened to him. Now, Kirkpatrick's a conservative. He's not about to vote for Mario Cuomo or say anything terribly good about him, but he said he's one tremendous speaker, and he had those people just completely in the palm of his hands. He is a tremendous orator. He compared him to Henry Hyde, who's also wonderful. I've never seen Henry Hyde in action, but Henry Hyde is one of those guys who can stand up and just spellbind a group, and Cuomo can do the same thing. Now, people in New York have gotten used to it, but out there in the country, it would really be a good show, would it not?
When he is on, he's a fantastic speaker. He could convince you that it's nighttime in the middle at noon, but he's not always on. And he is extremely sensitive to criticism.
Very touchy.
And the press has not been tough on him. There are a lot of issues that they could have brought up. There are a lot of issues that they could get him with, and they haven't. And I think they're saving him for the big day when, and if he loses his cool in a campaign, that would essentially put the finish to him.
See, that's why I don't think he's going to run. I really believe he's very thin-skinned. And listen, There's no more. That's not a mortal sin to be thin-skinned. It's just to get you in a lot of trouble if you're running for office. And he is thin-skinned, and he doesn't like any criticism, and he will not tolerate it, and he'll attack anyone who gives it to him. Well, you can do that in Albany, I think, but I don't think he's going to be able to pull that with the Washington Press Corps. If he starts playing that game with them, they'll destroy him. Ask Richard Nixon what they can do.
Well, they tend to get the last word.
Yes. And there's some pretty smart cookies in there, too. Yeah. So I think he's going to look at that and say, no, I'm not up to that. I don't want to do that. I don't
he would like to be president so bad that he can taste it. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I have no idea why anyone would want to be president. But I know that he is just very anxious to be president. And I think he is to the practical point where he has to make a decision. You just can't. Not only is it affecting him and whether or not he's successful, but it's affecting all the other candidates who are not being taken seriously until people know what the full field looks like.
Now, meanwhile, the Republicans have their problems too, because Pat Buchanan, a very articulate conservative, is apparently going to run. So George Bush is going to have some problems too, isn't he?
I don't think those are serious problems.
You don't?
No.
Well, think about this, though. In 1980, Teddy Kennedy ran against Carter and, of course, got nowhere, but he hurt Carter enough so that Reagan could take him. In 76, Reagan ran against Ford, didn't get the nomination, but then Ford lost to Carter. So historically, it seems that when a sitting president receives a challenge in his own party, he loses.
You know, anything's possible, and certainly with the volatile situation that we have in this world, in this country, with our economy the way it is, anything is possible. But at the moment, I think people are looking at it this way. At the moment, you can speculate as much as you want because it's not serious. There's no election tomorrow. So we can say, yes, I'd vote for him, or no, I wouldn't vote for him.
But when the chips are down.
When it comes to pocketbook issues next November, people are likely to say, even if they're not a fan of George Bush, they'll go with the devil they know rather than one they don't know.
We have Don Davidsen with us. You may join us, 324-1480. Back in a moment.
Selecting a nursing home for a loved one isn't easy until you've discovered Hornell Gardens Nursing and Rehabilitation. Hornell Gardens delivers the highest level of care, compassion, and commitment with amenities and activities that will enrich body, mind, and spirit. It's a place that's close to home. Stop in for a tour of Hornell Gardens, located at 434 Monroe Avenue in Hornell, or to learn more, call 585-222-CARE or visit hurlbutcare.com.
We're looking at a lot of clouds during today with maybe a flurry or snow shower passing through. Low to mid-30s during this afternoon. Tonight, still some clouds, low temperature mid-20s. Clouds, occasional sun on Wednesday, 34 to 38. It'll become partly to mostly cloudy and 25 to 30 Wednesday night. Thursday, mostly cloudy, breezy, and turning milder with high temperatures near or a bit over 40. And there'll be a chance of rain or showers for Friday, breezy and mild as well. This is meteorologist Gary Best.
Now back to the Newsmaker show from November of 1991.
Assemblyman Donald Davidsen is with us, and we're talking about a wide range of issues. And you may join us if you have any questions for the Assemblyman at 324-1480. That's the telephone number. Now, is the governor calling you folks back to session next month?
Nobody knows. We have one problem. The Speaker of the Assembly is currently on trial.
He's under indictment, isn't he?
He's on trial. It's the second week of the trial for mail fraud. If he were to be convicted, he would be automatically lose his seat, and we would be looking for a new Speaker. The rumor is that we'll be going back around the 16th of December. But there's nothing certain at all. The one thing that is certain is that we are facing another big deficit, but that's not a surprise. I told you that back in June when we did the budget, and it's growing. Every time people make an estimate, they say it's 300 million or 600 million, and there are some estimates I saw the other day that it may be 3 billion, which is probably closer to the truth.
Let me ask you this question about what you can do, because we live in an area that's very heavily, I don't want to say dependent, but favored by state jobs. So when people say, well, we got to cut that state payroll, that sounds good, but then they're talking about jobs in Hornell, and that doesn't sound so good. Or they're talking about jobs at Alfred State College, and suddenly we think, well, this isn't the way to go. We got to. Well, how do you solve this problem without attacking payroll? In business, that's the first thing you attack when things are troublesome. You attack payroll. You lay people off. You combine jobs. But if you do that in government, you have a secondary ripple effect in these communities, right?
Remember Willie Sutton, the bank robber?
Yes.
They asked him why he robbed banks, because that's where the money is. Well, you know, that you have to use the same theory. Where are we spending the money? Are we spending it on payroll? No. You can fire everybody, and you probably still couldn't balance things. We spend, out of $52 billion, we spend $19 billion on social programs, welfare and Medicaid. Of the $19 billion, 11 is Medicaid. Now, what are you getting for that Medicaid money? Not nearly as much as you ought to. You're spending way too much money, you're not giving good care, and you're not reimbursing the doctors in the hospital. So that's the place where we need to do some work. And I think that clearly people are recognizing that Medicaid is the program that is eating up the state's resources and is actually killing the state government.
All right, now the governor this morning is proposing a lump sum welfare grant. What does he mean by that?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen his proposal.
Okay, but I think the basic idea is that you just, instead of having all these administrators and all these commissions and all these departments, you just simply say, well, listen, Don, if things are tough, here's a check, and you take it from there. Is that what he's got in mind?
I have no idea. I know his proposal on Medicaid is to the state was going to pick up the county share, and they were also going to take a percentage of the county's sales tax. And I know what that would do. That would take money from upstate New York and put it toward New York City, but it wouldn't address the problem. I mean, his problem is he's looking at how are we going to pay these bills. What he needs to look at is how are we going to reduce these bills? How are we going to spend less? Instead of trying to figure out how to cover the deficit and raise taxes, he's got to figure out how to spend less.
So you're saying it's not in laying off workers, it's in attacking the welfare program.
Well, particularly the Medicaid program. Medicaid is very expensive.
But in the real world, now you can't do that, can you? Can you imagine what's going to happen to you in the history books if you're the fellow that takes away the medical care for the elderly and the poor?
No, that's not what we're saying. The medical care actually for the elderly and the poor elderly and the poor is very poor. They get in fact, if they can find a doctor, they're lucky. Here we're spending $11 billion, and the poor aren't getting medical care. That's the real crime of it. What happens is it's firstly the system's being ripped off terribly. By New York City area, people go in and they get all these prescriptions and things and take them out in the street and sell them. That's costing. And there are also again in New York City area, there's a lot of physicians that are ripping off the system. It's a system that's just ripe with fraud. Additionally, it doesn't give good care. We knew of one family that had 270 visits to the emergency room. That's $27,000 one item. And you don't get good care at the emergency room. And I don't mean to say that the people there don't take care of you. I mean, it's not
how you should take care of people.
Well, it's not consecutive care, and there's no history. There's no preventive care. It's just fix whatever's broken and off you go.
So what you're saying is that we're spending $11 billion and not getting anything for it. Well, suppose you start getting something for it. You're still spending $11 billion, though, aren't you?
No, we could cut that considerably.
You're on that committee, aren't you?
No.
You're not on the health committee?
But we have brought amendments to the floor of the Assembly trying to cut some of these things out of the budget. Managed care and it's something as a demonstration project. Copay. Why should everyone who purchases their own insurance, and in fact the taxpayers, all have to pay part of their medical bills, and if you're on welfare you don't need to pay anything? I mean, I'm not saying you have to big copay, but 50 cents or $1 or $3 or something like that, just so that you also have an investment in your health care. I think that's important, that people, everybody share in this. And I don't think that would hurt anything.
May I make a comment that really is kind of off the wall, but I really think that regardless of how good your intentions may be, and I mean you in the Assembly, or how dedicated you may be, you'll never devise a system that someone won't be able to work to their advantage. And hasn't that been true of welfare right from the beginning? We're spending God knows how much money on welfare, and they haven't solved a thing, but a lot of people are getting rich.
Well, that's because
they're good livings.
That's because of the approach of throwing money at problems. You know, if it doesn't work, give it more money. Welfare is designed and is in fact destroyed most families in that have participated. It is not designed to help people help themselves. It is designed to actually buy their souls. They become a ward, a vassal of the state, and the state owns you, and you don't have to do anything. You're not allowed to do anything, and it doesn't help the people that it's supposed to help. And I think people are recognizing that now.
Well, wouldn't you have a revolution if you started to take that money away? You'd have a revolution down there.
You can't take it away. You've got to develop programs that provide transition, so people can work their way off welfare into self-sufficiency. And that's the kinds of things that we need to work on. And finally, I see a glimmer of hope where even people from the New York City area are recognizing there is a problem, we need to address it, and there are solutions. So I have some hope.
Donald Davidsen, thank you for sharing this hope, and we'll be talking to you next month, and by that time you may be back in session, so we'll have an idea of where we go from here. Assemblyman Donald Davidsen, our guest this morning on the Newsmaker program, here on WLEA, where we check out world news next on the Information Source and the News Authority, coming up on 9 a.m.
Join Kevin Doran Monday morning at 8:40 on the Newsmaker Show with guest Alfred University professor Dr. Savoya Rebovich on WLEA, where the news is next.
The voice of Gary Gray right there was November 1991. Interesting stuff here. It's almost like a radio version of the History Channel.
1480 on your AM dial. This is WLEA, Hornell. From ABC News, I'm Joe Templeton. Israeli Prime Minister Shamir arrived at the White House just a few minutes ago to meet with President Bush to discuss the next phase of the Middle East peace talks. ABC's Dean Reynolds in Tel Aviv says Palestinian representatives in Jerusalem put out the word this morning that the next session of the talks will be held in the U.S.
The Palestinians broke the news today that the next round of Arab-Israeli direct talks will be held on Wednesday, December 4th in Washington. In the West Bank today, the U.S. consul, Molly Williamson, arrived at the home of Palestinian spokesman Hanan Ashrawi to formally extend that invitation. The Palestinians had hoped to continue the talks in Madrid or somewhere else, and while they will accept Washington as the next location, Mrs. Ashrawi said it is not without certain reservations.
Correspondent Reynolds says the Israelis are not at all happy that the announcement on the talks came from the Palestinians.
It was supposed to be a formal announcement at the White House. The Israelis are hopping mad that the Palestinians jumped the gun, and they see this as a further example of their failure to bargain in good faith.
While this morning's White House meeting between President Bush and Shamir will deal with the next round of the talks, the president is expected to emphasize to Shamir that he feels the building of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories remains an obstacle to peace. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill may be putting in some extra hours as they work to clear away legislation and adjourn for the year. Here's ABC's Vic Ratner.
Adjourning Congress next week looks a lot closer now that both House and Senate have passed bank reform bills, even though differences between the two still have to be worked out. It took the House 3 tries to get a bill approved. Another roadblock was cleared when Republicans in the Senate gave up their effort to block an anti-crime package, which also has to be worked out with the House. House Majority Leader Richard Gephardt predicted for his colleagues that Congress will finish up and they'll be on their way home by dawn next Wednesday, but both House and Senate may have to meet through the weekend to make adjournment next week possible. Vic Ratner, ABC News at the Capitol.
The United Nations is getting a new secretary, Boutros Ghali of Egypt, to succeed Javier Perez de Cuellar, who is retiring.
Some great voices in this past half hour. The great voice of Kevin Doran, the great voice of ABC's Joe Templeton, the great voice of Gary Gray on the station ID at the top of the hour. Some interesting insights there from the late Assemblyman Don Davidsen. Tomorrow we'll be hearing a Newsmaker show from November of 1995 when Kevin Doran interviewed Alfred University professor Dr. Savoya Rebovich about the Bosnian War going on at that time. Stay at 1480 WLEA Hornell.